So let's talk about the first subtype,
Yeah.
dominant subtype, ESTJ dominant subtype. What does this look like?
So I think that this is sort of an archetypal, or excuse me, not archetypal. This is more of a stereotype of an ESTJ.
Yes.
When we think of ESTJs, a lot of times people automatically think of the dominant ESTJ. So some of the characteristics that come along with this subtype is that they're active, ambitious, decisive, outgoing, practical. They work hard, and they are usually navigating their way towards at least responsibility, if not power. All right. And there is a poise that comes along with this ESTJ. They're usually pretty good at sort of showing up the way that they need to show up in order to make happen what they want to make happen. The brain wiring that is unique to them is really good about putting ideas into action. That's a big piece of the dominant version. And they do things like talk and walk on the go. All right. So they're constantly in motion, constantly working, constantly getting things done. And when they communicate, they do it with a focus on goals. All right. So everything is about implementation and getting into action. So what ends up being just sort of their the unsurprising list of careers that are good for them.
I already can see it in my mind.
Yep. Leaders, business owners, independent consultants, public speakers. If they go towards business or community work, it's going to look like a background in accounting, human resources, marketing, medicine, statistics. But Dario makes sure to articulate or clarify that these are not analysts, right? They don't have the patience for technical work. And so they might have a background in learning some of these things, but they're not going to take it into their careers, if they want to stay a dominant subtype. It's not fast enough. And so, like you mentioned, the list of careers, there were a couple of them on there that I'm like, I don't think a dominant subtype could do that career because it would require too much patience. So this is a subtype that is, very assertive, very on the go, and doesn't really like to have to slow down too much.
Probably is very good at delegation and directing energies and resource and people to create an actual goal in the world, like to make something happen as an outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're very efficient. They're very tapped into group dynamics. The challenge is that they're not terribly sensitive to feelings. And so again, this is sort of when people think of ESTJs, a lot of times they think of a dominant ESTJ who's insensitive. But even when a dominant ESTJ does some inner work, right, they balance their inner world and their outer world, they actually can be quite inspiring. They don't have to be insensitive to feelings. It's just if they're young, that tends to be one of the challenges.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about some of the jobs. Let's talk a little bit about the geekiness part, like for the type geeks that are listening along. This is associated with the chemical of testosterone more than the other subtypes, and in the neurotransmitter way. What is the attunement of the cognitive function level for this? The cognitive functions ESTJs are using. The dominant driver function is extroverted thinking, effectiveness. That's how they make their best decisions. And ESTJs learn information or perceive the world through their co-pilot, auxiliary is the technical name, of introverted sensing. We call it memory. So what attunement do these two functions have when we're talking about the dominant?
Okay, so for the type geeks out there, each of the functions can have either what's called analytic bent or a holistic bent. And think of this as basically input-output, and or a desire to sort of assert your energy to the outside world or to use it to understand things or sort of receive information from the outside world. And for the dominant subtype, they have an analytic bent on both of those functions.
That's different than judging and perceiving, though.
Exactly.
Because it almost sounded like that's what you're explaining.
Yeah, no, this is not about introversion or extroversion. This is not about judging and perceiving. This is just every single cognitive function has the capacity to receive and to assert. Almost
like a focus, like really point focused or more diffused focused,
right.
Wide field versus very specific, like sniper versus shotgun.
Exactly. It's like, am I more sort of open to information out here, or am I more, do I have my blinders on and I've got a more of assertive, exactly like a sniper way of looking at it. And for dominant ESTJs, both of their preferred functions, both introverted sensing, memory, and extroverted thinking, effectiveness, reverse order of preference, by the way, both of those functions have a more sniper, sort of blinders on, but directive, assertive energy to them.
Okay. And so you can clearly see the reason why this ESTJ is the stereotype online. You probably have worked for one of these ESTJs at some point in your life. In your career, even if you are an ESTJ listening along, you probably have worked for another ESTJ of this persuasion, of this flavor, because they tend to end up in management or leadership. And so you'll probably have a memory, oh yeah, I know what an ESTJ is. That I used to have a boss that was an ESTJ, or somebody that I knew in my past career or something like that, or maybe you work with one right now. So I think this is why it's such a common stereotype.
Yeah, and there's a lot of flexibility, actually, interestingly enough. Even though there is a dominant energy, they're really good at being whatever the context requires them to be, right? Like quickly, asking a question, getting information, and then sort of quickly navigating based on the answer they get. And so you do see these ESTJs in a lot of different fields because they do the job. Yeah, they do what needs to be done.
Awesome.